I'm live, and I wanted to talk Navarrete versus Liam Wilson last night. This was a 16-1 fight. 16-1, over under 7.5. Now, the reason I want to bring that up off the top is this wasn't designed to be a great fight. This wasn't designed to be a back and forth fight. This wasn't designed to be an even odds fight. However, it ended up being all of those things, and that's due to Navarrete's style. And this is why Navarrete will always be interesting to boxing fans such as myself and other boxing fans out there, because you need fighters like this in the sport. You need fighters who are going to be entertaining no matter who they're in there with, win or lose. And what I do not want to see them do going forward is promote Navarrete as this guy who needs to remain undefeated in the future in order to be marketable, because he's marketable as a fighter, as a warrior, as a guy. Shout out my guy Jesus M in the building. And this is just off the top of my head. I just wanted to come on here. This isn't meant to be one of these big podcasts, big shows. This is train of thought stuff. Just wanted to get behind the microphone before I forget what happened last night while it's still fresh in my mind. Shout out to my guy Bavik in the building. Navarrete looked horrible. Valdez will pick him apart. And here's the thing with that. I'm glad you brought this comment up, and let me just sort of flow off of that. And we're going to go in many different directions with what happened last night. Navarrete is a guy who looked that way in his last fight as well. Navarrete is a guy who we know, no matter who he's in there with, he's a slow starter. If you're a guy who can throw short shots, you're going to be able to pick off Navarrete early in the fight. But what he does is he continues. He's got attrition. He's got a chin. He's a guy who likes to lure you into that type of fight and then wear you down as round 5 comes, round 6 comes, round 7 comes. And we talked about this on Thursday on Hispanics Causing Panic on this channel as we're talking about the betting odds, right? D-Style and I brought it up. We said to bet the over 7.5, and I bet the over 7.5. I also bet the quarterly bet. I bet 9 through 12. Bet that as well, because I felt strongly, and D-Style felt strongly, especially, that Liam Wilson was going to have a lot of success early in this fight. A lot of success early in this fight. Liam Wilson's a guy who he's rangy. He has size, but he gives up his size. He likes to trade. And in those exchanges, he's landing shots. And as you saw early in the fight, to your point, Navarrete is giving you openings for counters. He's giving you openings for counters. So that's what you worry about with the Valdez fight. If you watch Valdez versus Berchelt, you kind of know what's coming with Navarrete. But Navarrete, I just warn you, is a guy with attrition. He's one of those guys who's going to find his way into fights against guys who are superior to him, like an Oscar Valdez as far as boxing style, but he's going to allow inferior opposition in fights to stay in fights with him, like his last 2 fights. He's a guy who's a 3-division champion, legit 3-division champion, so we got to give him credit. But is he a guy who's pound for pound? No, but that's my point. Like, we don't need to over criticize these fighters after every fight if they look beatable, if they look ordinary. Yes, we can critique them. We can critique them, of course. And I'll do that here, much like you're doing. It's fair. It is fair. But we need fighters like this in the sport. Logan Paul put out a tweet, or is it Jake Paul put out a tweet this morning? He's saying Conor McGregor was just announced to fight a guy. They're both 1-3. They've both been choked out. They've both been knocked out. But guess what? UFC fans are excited about those fights. They're still excited about watching a guy in the main event who's 1-3 in his last 4 against another guy in the main event who was 1-3 in his last 4. Both looked very bad in their last 4 fights, but they're still excited about it. And that's the UFC culture that we need to adopt as boxing fans. And it's the culture that we had. We had the UFC culture as boxing fans. We've been programmed and brainwashed into believing that everybody has to look great every single fight. Nobody can look vulnerable. Nobody can look flawed in order for us to still like these fighters going forward. And that's just not the case. I will continue to watch Navarrete every fight because I know what I'm going to get. I know I'm going to get a guy who's going to look flawed early on in the fight, give you openings, but then he's going to come on And then he's going to continue to throw punches. He's going to throw 7, 8, 9 combination punches. And if you watch this fight, he's giving Liam Wilson the openings early. Liam Wilson counters him with the left hook, puts him down. And first of all, this narrative, long count, Navarrete was saved. People need to stop with this stuff. First of all, it's not a 10-second count. It's a 10 count by referee discretion. 1, 2, 3. People bring up Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder, that he got some sort of long count. He got up at 10.5 seconds. It's not seconds. What you need to realize is the referee is counting and the fighter is watching the referee count, and he's responding to what the referee is counting and the direction that the referee is giving him. So if the referee, they're saying Navarrete got 24 seconds to recover yesterday. And I fully agree that referees do too much. Give me your gloves, walk towards me, let these fighters recover. I'll give you that. But Navarrete got up at 4. He got up at 4, leaned up against, he's a vet, right? Leaned up against the ropes. He's been here before. Took a couple of deep breaths, and he's waiting for the referee to give him directions to move forward, right? Wipe his gloves, shake his head, and he's taking all of the time that the referee is allowing him. If the referee gives him 8 seconds to recover, he's going to recover in 8 seconds and go forward. But the referee gives him 12. So what you can't say is, oh, look, it took Navarrete 12 seconds to walk forward. The referee gave him 12 seconds. He's a vet. He understands what he's doing. He's going to walk forward, and he's going to recover, and he's going to continue to fight. That's what Navarrete does. And this fight played out much like we expected on this channel, but I'm not going to act like I thought Navarrete was going to get knocked down, because I didn't. I did not. I did not think that Liam Wilson was going to knock Navarrete down. I didn't think Liam Wilson was some sort of big puncher coming into this fight, but he showed well. And these are the fights that I love in boxing and that we need to get more of. The surprising fights, right? The surprising fights where both fighters, you watch them fight, and I understand we can be overly critical of Navarrete here, or critical of Navarrete here. Look vulnerable early in the fight, but to me, that's stuff we knew already. We knew that of Navarrete already. I appreciate what that guy gives me, because he gives me entertaining fights no matter who he's in there with. But it's also one of those fights where the guy who lost, Liam Wilson's stock rose, and it takes me back to what Jake Paul said on Twitter earlier. A loss is not the end-all, be-all. Liam Wilson comes over from Australia, domestic level fighter up to this point from Australia, comes over, fights well, conducts himself well in this fight, and I want to see Liam Wilson fight again, even after the loss. And this is my point, is we don't throw fighters away after losses. This the O culture, the zero culture, I have to keep that zero in the right-hand column culture, it needs to go away. We need to get back to our roots. We need to go back to get these guys in the ring with each other as many times as possible throughout the year. And if they lose, they lose. If they win, they win. Let the chips fall where they may. After that, we reset the game, and then we put the chips back down. Get back to that. Get back to it. I'm tired of this. Oh, the guy looked flawed. The guy sucked. Tired of it. Navarrete needed to be pushed. That he did, and he was pushed. From here on, Navarrete top names. I agree, but I also agree with my guy Bavik here. I think that he is made to order. That Oscar Valdez, first of all, shout out my guy Chicano Prophet here. Appreciate you. And my guy Bruce Gass in the building as well. Always appreciate you coming through. Chicano Prophet, what a great fight. And it was. We've had a couple of fights already this year that have kind of snuck up on us, and then they happen, and we're like, these are the fights that are going to be tough to top as far as fight of the year. This was just a great fight. Great fight. Great fight. And to me, I'd like to keep it there instead of I'm going to have plenty of time to pick apart Navarrete's performance, and I'll do that in a short form video as far as him being wide, him giving up early rounds against inferior opposition. I think he's made to order for Valdez, even though I think that's a great fight. And let me touch on that real quick. Like, Valdez was in the ring after the fight. I love that. build up the fight, have Valdez there. Valdez wanted to be in this fight, but the injury got in the way. And it's another thing, like Valdez loses to Shakur Stevenson, right? And you got those protect the fans out there saying, "Oh, Valdez sucks. Valdez sucks. He looked terrible." No, he took his shot against Shakur Stevenson. He beats Burchelt. He fights Shakur Stevenson, loses the fight. It's not the end all be all. We want to see Oscar Valdez again, and now it sets up Navarrete versus Oscar Valdez, two guys who have looked vulnerable in the past, but who cares? It's a great fight. It's a great matchup, and it will be a great, entertaining fight, guys. That will be a great, entertaining fight. But if we look at it stylistically, Burchelt, the guy who is known as a slow starter, Valdez is going to pepper him early in that fight. The big question with that fight, with that matchup is, will Navarrete be able to do what he's done in the past against a guy like that at 130? Will Navarrete be able to take those shots early on? And then round 4, round 5, round 6, start to pressure Oscar Valdez, make Oscar Valdez uncomfortable the way Navarrete has been able to do in the past, particularly against the inferior opposition he's fought in the last 2 fights. This isn't the guy he fought last time. This isn't Liam Wilson. This is Oscar Valdez we're talking about. Is Navarrete the type of guy who fights up to the level of competition? We know he fights down the competition, but there are those guys who, man, I don't like how he looked in his last fight against a guy he was 16-1 favorite against. And now he's a 3-1 underdog. I don't think the prospects are good, but then he shows up, right? Then Oscar Valdez peppers him early in the fight, which is going to happen, shorter shots. But then round 6, round 7, round 8, the same exact thing happens. Navarrete starts to come on. How does Oscar Valdez respond to that? Antonio Margarito is a guy who looked flawed in fights, right? Against both inferior opposition and superior opposition. But then he's able to turn it on in the middle rounds, and he's still there. How do you deal with a guy who is still there, still throwing 6, 7, 8 punch combinations? Miguel Cotto is a better pure boxer than Margarito, but guess what? Margarito is still there. How do you deal with that? How do you deal with the guy who is just throwing punches and bunches and still coming forward? You can't base a fighter on their previous fight. Shout out to Matador. Shout out OJ22. Let's see what we got. Navarrete is a must-watch on ESPN. His fights are thrilling. Never know what you're going to get. These are the fighters that we need in the sport. There is a market for them. And this is what I'm saying with guys like Munguia, William Zepeda. Stop trying to market these guys. And they may end up being that, but stop trying to market these guys as pound-for-pound talents, guys who are going to stay undefeated at the top level. They may, but they may not. But what I'm saying is be aggressive with these guys' careers. Be aggressive. Put them in front of people as much as possible. And if the top fight comes, put them in there with top opposition. And if they lose, who cares? Oscar Valdez just lost to Shakur Stevenson. We don't care. Liam Wilson just lost to Navarrete. We don't care. We want to see Liam Wilson again. We don't care. This culture, the protect the old culture, needs to go. So if William Zepeda loses 2 or 3 straight fights, who cares? I'm still here. Jaime Munguia loses 2 or 3 straight fights. Who cares? I'm still here. Navarrete loses to Oscar Valdez by a 3rd round knockout. Let's say that happens. Who cares? I'm still here. There's a market for these guys. There's a market for a Navarrete. This used to be HBO Boxing After Dark type fighters, right? They may have lost their last fight by knockout, but it was a great fight, and we want to see another great fight 4 to 5 months later. These used to be the HBO Boxing After Dark fighters. They used to be the ESPN Friday Night Fight type fighters. Give us more of this. More of this. Must watch. Navarrete is marked down for me as must watch. I was at a party last night. I'm on my phone. I'm watching the fight. Don't care. Watching the fight on my phone. I get home, rush home, 6th round, put it on my TV. Watch this morning. Navarrete is that type of guy for me. Like, he's the dude I got to watch. He's a must-see TV. UFC fans are better fans, in my opinion, with a better product to watch as well. And this is what I'm saying. Like, Dana White's on Twitter this morning announcing fights, wheeling and dealing. This fight's happening. This fight's happening here. This fight's happening here. We've got Tough 31 coming. Season 31 of their reality show coming. Conor McGregor is one of the coaches. And then after that, we're going to do the fight. More of this in boxing. We need things to speed up. We need things to speed up. And by doing that, you build stars, right? And you may access. This is the point. Like, we can't even purposely build stars anymore in this country. But just by doing boxing, just by doing the sport, just by allowing the sport to breathe and just putting fights there that need to happen, no matter if this guy's with this promotional outfit or that guy's with that promotional outfit, you're going to accidentally build stars. You're going to do it by accident. Take last night, like 16-1 odds. Liam Wilson, that was an accident. Liam Wilson's not supposed to knock Navarrete down in the 4th round. He's not. He's not. Things accidentally happen as you put things in motion. We can't keep every single fight in theoretical world. We need things to go from theory to reality. You can't. I see these dudes do these fantasy matchups on Twitter all the time, and I'm like, good Lord. Fantasy matchup boxing Twitter is the worst thing I've ever seen. Like, if I could imagine what hell is like, I think it's just for eternity scrolling through hell's version of Twitter and seeing fantasy matchups. I'm seeing dudes, Marvin Hagler versus Charlo. What would happen? But it's even worse when you have guys who are active fighters not actively fighting, and we're battling on Twitter and on YouTube as to who would win these fights, and these fights just don't develop ever. So give me more guys like Navarrete. He's going to fight. He's going to be in a fight, no matter if he's fighting a guy who's ranked number 25 or a guy who's ranked number 1. He's going to be in a fight. It's going to be a fight. The guy he's fighting is going to know he was in a fight. And we're going to have fun. It's what we're here for, right? They have fun. Opponents feel confident versus Navarrete when they have success, but fall in Navarrete firefight. And that's the thing. Like, I don't want us to get too hung up on Navarrete's early round problems, because there is a science behind it. Not all science is pretty. Not all sweet science is sweet. Like, it's not all pretty. There's a science behind what all of these guys are doing. And if it's successful, it's not pretty for Navarrete early in fights. It's not. But there's a method to his madness. He's drawing these guys in, and don't undervalue that. I would pick Valdez to win that fight. And I'm pretty confident in that Oscar Valdez is going to win that fight. But I'm not discounting the fact that Navarrete in the 5th, 6th, 7th round can lure Valdez into the same type of fight that all these other guys up until this point have been in with Navarrete. I'm not discounting that. And I'm very intrigued by that fight. I still want to see Valdez Navarrete. I just think Valdez winning. I agree with you. Munguia should be appreciated this way as well. He's entertaining, but gets criticized like crazy. I think the thing with Munguia is people want to know where it's going with Munguia, because we start to hear the rumors, and then they have a couple fights. The thing that I like about Munguia is they're keeping him active, right? He was a very active fighter the past couple of years compared to his peers. But people want to know that this is going somewhere, because he's a guy with a lot of fights, and he's a guy who we feel like he should be further along with opposition. So we don't want to hear rumors like Shane Mosley Jr., stuff like that. We want to know that this is going somewhere, and these are makeable fights. The good news is I think he's with the right promotional outfit, because Oscar has shown that he is willing to put his guys at risk. He has shown that. And I think Golden Boy is going to have an aggressive year in 2023. So if my theory is right with that, I think Munguia is going to be in one of those fights where we're like, this is the fight we've been waiting for Munguia. I don't know if it's the next one. I doubt it's the next one, but at some point this year, I think Munguia is going to be in that type of fight where we're like, all right, we're going to find out now. We're going to fight. This isn't Jimmy Kelly. We're going to find out now where Munguia is at that level. If Munguia is a top fighter, we're going to find out. But the good thing, like I said about Munguia, is you have so many options with him because it doesn't matter if he loses. Dude, the dude's fun. He's fun. Shout out my guy, Nando. Appreciate you rolling through on the weekend work day. Appreciate you coming through as always. My guy, El Cheeto, BXN. Let's see what else we got. A loss is not all be all, but matchmaking has to consider after he loses, like Wilson. Great fights only elevate everyone involved, including the promoters. This is what I'm saying. Like, this is the old traditional way of building fighters. This is the old traditional way of building stars. Right? It's just put them in fights, just set the board up, have as many fights as possible, put top guys in there with each other, have entertaining fights, and you're going to accidentally just build stars. It's going to happen. It's going to naturally happen. Some guy that you weren't even worried about building is just going to sneak up, and you're like, oh, he puts a nice 2 to 3 string fight together. And you're like, oh, we got something here. We got a marketable guy who was putting wins together. But in order to do that, you have to get these fighters more active, number one. And number two, we need to get these fights out of theoretical world and into reality. We need more fights in reality. And in this part-time business boxing model, we just can't do that. It doesn't allow for us. It really handcuffs us to build stars. And that goes back to the Jake Paul tweet, right? Jake Paul was right and he was wrong at the same time. He's wrong in that putting the blame on the boxing fans, because it's not the boxing fans who did this. It's the fighters, it's the promoters, it's the boxing, it's the power brokers in boxing who built this culture of we need to protect this O. We need to protect our assets. And in doing so, they've created really this monster of new boxing fans who have come in the last decade that I don't really know how to deal with, to be honest. I don't really know. I haven't found an effective way to deal with the new boxing fans. I haven't. You know, at first I thought that I could just come on here and just try to reason with them. Then I thought that, you know, I can kind of sort of bully them on Twitter into coming around, but it just doesn't happen. It's like fighting zombies. Like I said, like you just shoot and you shoot and shoot and they just wake up. The brain shots don't even work anymore because they don't have them. They don't have boxing brains. You know, so they think that anybody who looks vulnerable should be disposed of, or not thought highly of, not worth investing your time in the future as a boxing fan. And anybody who loses is exposed. And I brought up this before. All these guys lost. Some by knockout, some by vicious knockout. And they're on posters. They're stars. They're in the Hall of Fame. They were stars. In order to get that back, we need to put things in motion. We need to dispose of that culture right there. Because if that culture is running prevalent still in boxing, then it handcuffs us. Because the only way, they don't want to hear this. They do not want to hear this. The only way you can build stars is through the traditional way of fights. Great fights. Great fights build great fighters. Great fights build fans. And it's still the only way. It's the traditional way of building stars. You can't do it this new age way. You can't do it through theoretical fights. You can't do it through Instagram followers. I don't care if you have 3-4 million Instagram followers. You can't do it that way, because at some point people are going to get bored with that. At some point people are going to watch you fight and say something's off here. There's some sort of disconnect here between the 3 to 4 million Instagram followers or the Twitter followers and what you're actually doing in the ring. You can only fool people for so long. It's why Jake Paul has to start getting creative, because if you look at his pay-per-view numbers, they've been decreasing. People are getting bored with it. Make them fights. That's right. Wilson shouldn't be ashamed of this loss. He did his work. That's exactly right. It's exactly right. I mean, you can put in the chat, like, how many people in the chat want to see Liam Wilson fight again? Just put yes. Everybody's going to want to see Liam Wilson fight again after this performance, coming off of a loss. Everybody's gonna want to watch Navarrete fight again. That watched this fight, even if he looked vulnerable and was knocked down early in the fight, because we want to see these type of fights. My favorite fighters are the vulnerable ones. My favorite fighters are the ones that I can relate to. It's hard to relate. Like the prodigy stories are really boring. The Michael Jordan story, we all love Michael Jordan, but we can't relate to it. That's why they try to brainwash you into thinking that Michael Jordan was this guy in his freshman year of high school who just couldn't make the team. He was on the freshman team, and then the next year, sophomore year, he's leading the team on varsity. He just wasn't on the varsity team in freshman year. That's not real resistance. Like, that's not a real problem. The prodigy story, the Tiger Woods story, is sort of boring. We like the stories where you have the Rocky story, the underdog story. Those are the relatable ones. The Navarrete story is relatable. The Liam Wilson story is relatable to us. Dude comes over here as a domestic level fighter coming from Australia, flies over, fights a guy who's towards the top at 130, a guy who's already a 2-division champion, 16-1 underdog, and knocks him down in the 4th round. And we're like, whoa, where did this guy come from? Where did he come from? So even in the loss, we're intrigued now. We're intrigued that Navarrete, a 3-division champion, what would he do against an Oscar Valdez? What would happen in that fight? Would he be able to still impose his will against a guy like that? And even if not, we still want to see him fight again in the future. We're intrigued by guys who are vulnerable. Those are my favorite fighters. Miguel Cotto, vulnerable. Arturo Gatti, vulnerable. He's a vulnerable fighter. So, I mean, intriguing. Valdez losing to Shakur is not the biggest thing in the world. He lost to a guy who has all-time great potential. That's what I'm saying. Take your shot. Take your shot. I've said this in the past. Arturo Gatti took his shots. We knew he was going to lose to De La Hoya. We knew he was going to lose to Mayweather. But if he doesn't fight those fights, he never knows, right? He never knows. We would have thought, he would have thought, like, man, could I possibly beat a pound for pound top 10 guy? Could I have possibly beat the pound for pound champion? I would have never known. But he took the shot. He lost. And guess what? We're right back. He could have fought the Thomas Domgards of the world for $2 million per fight. He could have done it and retire with a much better record. He took his shots. He was kicked back down, but we were all still there after the fight. If you're emotionally invested in a fighter, you're going to stick around through the ups and downs. Canelo loses to Mayweather. Canelo loses to Bivol. We're still here. We're emotionally invested in the story. You're not going to leave. You're not going to leave 2 hours into a movie if you're that emotionally invested in it. I made a mistake years ago and went to watch Hot Chick at the movies. This was like 20 years ago, and it was a terrible movie. And I left halfway through because I'm not invested in it emotionally. So it does nothing. It does nothing for me. It's a bad choice. It's a bad choice. I left. But if you're emotionally invested in the movie halfway through, you're going to stick around, even if there are ups and downs in it. And it's the same thing with fighters. Ups and downs, you're going to stick through because the fighter is giving you what you want. They're providing you value as a boxing fan. How about Liam Wilson versus Yoet or Conlon? And that's the thing. There are so many different directions. So many different directions you can go with a Liam Wilson. Continue lining him up. He can be like that guy, like that measuring stick guy, right? Like, this is the guy who knocked Navarrete down in the 4th round and was in that fight. So the next top guy, put him in there with him, the next guy coming up, to see how he measures against the Navarrete. We all know the triangle theory doesn't work, but it's still a good measuring stick. And then put him in there with that guy. He's a guy who's going to get fights coming through. Boxing fans are waking up and realizing that the O is not the end of a career. I hope you're right. I hope more people are waking up because I've been trying to wake them up. Been trying. My guy JC, Vaquero, exciting. Let's see, the way Navarrete hopping punches are dangerous, but they become telegraphed. That's right. His shots are, there's no doubt. There is no doubt. His shots are telegraphed. There's no doubt you can see him coming from a mile away. But there's something he does. There are small adjustments that he makes, but it's not even the adjustments. It's that he's still there. And he's one of those guys that you watch him on film and you're like, how is some of this stuff working? Like, how is it that he's getting to guys in the middle rounds? How is it that he's wearing guys down? And these punches that weren't effective early on are all of a sudden becoming effective. He's one of those guys, and you don't truly know until you get in the ring with him. That's the thing. You don't truly know until you get in the ring with him. So Valdez could be sitting ringside and thinking, I got this guy pegged. You thought the Burchell fight was ugly. I got this guy pegged. But then he gets in the ring with him, and he's nailing him with shorter shots in the early rounds. But Navarrete keeps getting up. That's the thing. If Navarrete keeps getting up, what happens then? What happens then? That's the intriguing part about it. But the great part about it is, even in a loss, we don't care because we'll still show up to watch Navarrete fight. We all take O's in life. We get up, dust ourselves off, and we go on. This isn't just boxing. It's life. And that's why fighters like that intrigue us. That's why we can relate to those fighters. Unlike the guys who are just prodigies and look indestructible, those guys aren't relatable. The best stars are the ones who are vulnerable. They're vulnerable. Even great talents like this, we didn't know what would happen if this guy fought this guy, or this guy fought this guy, or this guy fought that guy. That's why we need top level fighters fighting each other too, is we need that vulnerability in the equation. We need those question marks in the equation. So even if a guy looks indestructible, right there, what if he fights him? What if he fights him? What happens then? That's the thing. So even guys who were looked indestructible, even guys who looked unbeatable, what if Mayweather would have fought Pacquiao in 2009? What happens? We'll never know. Unfortunately, we'll never know. What happens if Bud would have fought, or Errol would have fought Bud back in 2019? We'll never know. We'll never know, unfortunately. We just don't know. We just don't know. More fights from theory to reality. And in doing that, in that process, you'll be building more stars. And by extension, you'll be building more fans here in America. We're missing that part of the equation. There's too much over here in the theory column, not enough in the reality column. Exactly. We're going to see free smoke and dudes get knocked the F out. I like the way Navarrete never stopped punching, even though he was tired or hurt. Now that's Mexican style. And that's the thing. Like, he just keeps punching. He just keeps coming forward. So if he keeps getting up and he keeps punching, he wears guys down. He just wears them down. We got an old school HBO Bad Fight, Boxing After Dark fight on ESPN last night. That's good for the sport. That's a big void for me. It's like a big void for me as a boxing fan. I didn't know, honestly, man, I didn't know how much of a void HBO leaving would be for me as a boxing fan. It turns out, because HBO started to get really ugly towards the end. I didn't like the commentary team towards the end. I felt things started to fall off a little bit, but still, even at that point, it's still better than the products we're getting right now. And it's a void, especially HBO Boxing After Dark. And there's really a void for me as a boxing fan, because, and guys like Bruce Gass will tell you in the chat, like going back to ESPN or USA Tuesday night fights, like those type of fights. And you knew where to go to get them, right? You knew Tuesday night, USA, I'm going to watch these fights, and I know what type of fights I'm going to get. I'm going to get guys who are desperate to get to the top. Desperate. And they're matched perfectly with each other because they're both at the same level of development. Or you're going to get a guy coming up who they're feeding him guys, but you start to see that process, right? It's like the Alan Green process with ESPN Friday Night Fights. Another void is ESPN Friday Night Fights used to provide you the Alan Greens of the world, and you'd watch them, and then 3 months later, you'd watch them, and he'd knock guys out. And then 3 months later, you'd watch them, same place, same time, watch them fight, main event, and you'd see that development process, and you see them raise or lower the resistance, give them more resistance, more resistance, more resistance each fight. And you'd see the development. You see, okay, this is now a guy worth investing in as a boxing fan. And then he graduates to Showtime, right? We're missing that process. You're getting these guys now on undercards of other fights, and you don't really know where to go to see them. Like, how nice would it have been to see a Boots Ennis headline ESPN Friday Night Fights or USA, but they just didn't do that. Like a Boots Ennis, they're just putting on undercards of other guys' fights instead of headlining Showbox every 3 months. Every 3 months, Boots Ennis, Boots Ennis, Boots Ennis, and then putting more resistance on him on that level before graduating him to Showtime Championship Boxing, where he's headlining. Instead, he's buried on undercards once or twice per year. It's just not a good thing. Boxing needs to build stars in fights, no matter if they lose. Fighters build their names so they get more opportunities, and that's the thing too. It's like boxing is littered. Boxing history is littered with guys who lost and became stars. This notion that guys can't be stars if they lose fights, it's got to go. It's got to go. Like, they're putting these guys in bubble wrap. They're bubble wrapping them. Proves my point last night. Who wants to see Seek style defense would have been a boring fight. People want to see KOs in offense. Yeah. Chicks dig the long ball, right? They dig the long ball, and then the long ball goes away and Major League Baseball's ratings decline. People want to see home runs. People want to see slam dunks. People want to see big hits in the NFL, and people also want to see knockouts. We can't separate that. It's like the Super Bowl. No one wants to see a low-scoring Super Bowl game, right? F defense. I mean, defense is good as long as you don't get on your bike. That's the thing. Like, just don't get on your bike. Don't get on your bike. I don't mind defense. I don't mind the sweet science. I like it all. But don't get on your bike. Give Munguia some belts and he becomes new age Fernando Vargas. Build him. Put him in there with guys. Get aggressive. Let's go. Get aggressive. Wilson reminded me of Azuma Nelson coming out of nowhere with a loss and still want more. I got a ninth round KO pick right. Navarrete, what up, Calix and chat? And that's a good pick. That was a good pick, Remy. And I had that last 33% in my pick, 9 through 12, and I had the over 7.5 rounds. So it ended up being a good one for me. I don't always hit. And my betting streak has been sort of bad, but last night was good. Navarrete was good to me last night as a betting guy. Wilson can have 2 fights and challenge for another belt. We're still invested, right? We're still invested in guys like Wilson. We need Castillo, Corrales, scraps. Yes, we do. That we do. We need a year off upsets where certain fighters lose that so fans can see anything can happen and they can still be great. It's the punches you don't see, and Navarrete awkward as heck. That's the thing. Like, I'm glad you said that. It's not only that Navarrete keeps punching, right? It's that you have those awkward fighters, and you don't really know what to do with them. Like, Marcos Maidana was that type of guy. Now, you might watch film on Marcos Maidana and like, what is this? What's the big deal? And I think he lost some Devin Alexander fight, and then he comes back and he beats Adrian Broner out of nowhere. And like, people don't realize how big of an upset that was at the time. Adrian Broner was on people's pound for pound list. I still don't understand why, but he was on people's pound for pound list. He was a huge, I think it was over 10-1, huge favorite against Marcos Maidana. And Marcos Maidana starts hitting him, starts throwing those unorthodox punches and knocks him out. He did the same thing against Mayweather in the first fight. Mayweather didn't know what to do with those shots. There were shots coming from everywhere, wide shots, awkward shots, and he didn't know what to do with it. those type of guys are tough to deal with. Those pitchers with the weird windups, right? It's like a guy like Sam Solomon. Sam Solomon didn't have much talent at all. And Sam Solomon, by the way, is still fighting, but he had a ton of losses, but he's in there with guys. Like I remember when fighting Winky Wright, and Winky Wright is having some issues with him. Guys at the top level have issues with the Sam Solomon because his punches are so awkward and his motor is so crazy. You have an awkward guy with a motor, that guy can go a lot of places. An awkward guy with a motor who can punch, that guy can go a lot of places. That guy can see the world. HBO was very biased towards the end. It got too sloppy for me. They were. But boy, do I still miss them. I think if they would have polished some things up, it still could have been great, but they just didn't feel like the sport was investable anymore. And I think that's because of the direction the sport started to take when PBC started to rear its ugly head. Just my opinion. Just my opinion. Don't get bent out of shape. And Showtime looks to be headed in that direction as well. So Marcus Morgan Hagler went through that struggle to get right. That he was. I miss that old grouch. I miss Larry Merchant too. I miss him too. Especially when he told Floyd his ass. Shout out Ricky Ricardo in the building. It was very good. Wilson was well prepared, but waiting to see more of him. I don't think Navarrete fights Valdez next, though. I don't think it's going to happen next. I think Valdez wants a fight coming off the injury in May. So I'm thinking later 2023 is what they're saying. But I'm glad they have Valdez there. I'm glad they got things in motion, promoting the fight. And that's going to be a fight. You circle a calendar and you are there. You are there. Like I watching that fight. That may be even a fight that I traveled to. That's one of those. GBP got those monthly Thursday night development cards on DAZN. They do. And I just think like Golden Boy is going to have an aggressive year. I just get that feeling from things that I'm hearing. They're going to have an aggressive year. I think Oscar goes through those ups and downs, right? He goes through those lows, peaks and valleys. But when he has those periods where he gets focused and he's not drawing abs and he's not doing weird drunk lives with his girlfriend, when he's focused, man, he's on his game. He's on his game. And I love when that happens because we get good fights out of it and we get good cross promotional fights because Oscar will cross promote. He will cross promote. Even with a Probellum, he will cross promote. He will put his fighters at risk. He will. He did it with Canelo. Even though he didn't want to, even though he had to be dragged there, he still did the Austin Trout fight. He still did the Mayweather fight. He still did the Arislandi Lara fight. He's willing to put his guys at risk. More so than other promoters, I should say. I got Serrano by late KO. I got Baumgartner winning a difficult decision. Keep an eye out for Ramla Ali on the undercard. And that's the thing, more fights today. And I'll say this. I do think that the favorites will cruise today in the ladies' fights. And I just think that's because the B side in the ladies' fights, I noticed they lack that equalizer. So I think Serrano cruises and they announce right after the fight, they announced the Katie Taylor fight for May. And then also with Baumgartner. From what I'm hearing from people who know Baumgartner's opponent, though, I'm hearing that you need to look out for that fight because Baumgartner may be overvalued in that fight. So I'm hearing that that's the fight. If there is going to be an upset, that's the one to look for, the Baumgartner fight. So be on the lookout for that one. Thoughts on Richard Torres? I'm glad you asked this, Jesus M. Richard Torres, from what we see, looks like one of those fighters, right? He looks like a flashy guy, nice skill, knocks guys out. Here's the thing, though. And I just can't, like, every time I watch Torres fight, it comes up because they're really bum bashing with him in particular. I really like Bob Arum's. Bob Arum is still the best at building stables, pinpointing young talent, saying this guy is going to be the next guy and trying to build stars the traditional way, right? minor league system, building these guys up through a farm system, providing proper resistance as they go on. And once they get to a certain level and these fighters don't look investable, Bob will drop them. Elvis, um, who's the latest guy? Berlanga. He'll just drop them. Like if they don't look investable and they don't look like there's a pathway forward, he'll drop them. But we find out earlier. That's why I like the top rank process. We find out earlier. However, I will say when I watch Torres fight, it looks to be severe bum bashing going on. And you need that development process in boxing, right? You need to feed guys bait dogs. Unfortunately, that's the way it is. And we can't separate ourselves. We can't separate that process in boxing. We just can't. We can't separate that process. Now, I think it goes on too long in boxing. Guys shouldn't be 20 fights in, 30 fights in, unless they're super active, like a lot of Mexican fighters are, right? Unless they're super active, I don't want to see that. I don't want to see guys fighting 3-4 times per year as prospects and 20, 30 fights in, still fighting this level of opposition, like a Brandon Lee, right? My issue with what they're doing with Richard Torres and I'm more pinpointing the boxing fans and the journalists here is they really get on the virtue signaling bandwagon when something goes wrong in boxing, like a guy tests positive for a PED or somebody gets hurt in a big fight, like the Morrell Jr. fight in the last fight. You can't just virtue signal. You got to be consistent from top to bottom. And what I noticed in boxing is, from following it for so long, is we only care about the A side fighter. We don't care about the B side fighter. And if that's how it is, that's fine. Like, I understand this is the culture of boxing and that's how it has to be. We have to feed guys. I don't want to call them bums, but you got to feed guys bait dogs early on in the process in order to get them experience, get them some bodies on their resume, and it's fine. But I don't want to hear guys virtue signal over here and then watch a Richard Torres fight and beat a guy who he really doesn't belong in the ring with and say, oh my God, it's the greatest knockout of all time. It's the greatest knockout of all time, because they're feeding Torres really. Like, they're feeding him well right now. They're setting up his plate well, and he's getting full off of it. And I'm at the point with Torres where it looks good, but I still don't know. I don't know what to do with him. 2 to 3 years from now, I think we'll start to get answers. In the meantime, we just enjoy the knockouts, right? Because he does give us flashy knockouts. He does go in there and get rid of guys. And Top Rank, like I said, they have a phenomenal young roster. They do. They're already pushing guys like Shakur Stevenson up that level. Devin Haney, Lomachenko's already there, but these younger guys coming up. I'm telling you, Jared Anderson. If there is a guy that I can pinpoint that I think may be the next American star, it's him. Big Baby. He gets it. He's entertaining. He's got skill level at the same time. I think he could go 12 and outbox guys if it comes to that. And on top of that, he has the flash. He knows how to ring walk. He knows how to give post-fight interviews. He's a marketable guy. He's a guy with a good story. He's the full package, right? A Richard Torres, I don't know yet. It looks good, but I just wanted to give my quick thought on that is, these guys, if you're calling out fighter safety here, you got to call it out from top to bottom. That's the issue with going so hard on fighter safety, is there's so many B side guys. There are so many bait dogs out there being disrespected and put in harm's way that you're not paying attention to. You're only paying attention to it at the top level. And these gross mismatches are going. If we care about fighter safety that much, we got to get rid of this. We got to get rid of what we saw with Torres last night. I think he was facing like a football player or something, a guy who's a part-time fighter. So if we really care that much about fighter safety, like people are pretending they do, you got to get rid of Olympians fighting part-time boxers. But I'm not for that, by the way. I'm not for it. I'm fine with the process. I'm fine with it. I'm fine with being a boxing fan. And I know what I got myself into. Navarrete needs to fight consistently. That's right. Just keep fighting. If you're a Navarrete, fight. If you're a Williams, pay to fight. If you're a Jaime Munguia, fight. Just fight. Just fight. Just fight. And every fight doesn't have to be a home run. But Navarrete is a 3-division champ. Oscar De La Hoya's fake abs go perfect with his girl's fake breast. I'm not going any further with that comment. Torres' opponent said my ankle hurts. That Torres' uppercut was vicious. He does have a nice uppercut. He does. Tommy Gunn. You think he's Tommy Gunn? Richard Torres is just starting, but he ain't no Berlanga. We'll see. We'll see. People were saying that about Berlanga when he was coming up. Berlanga is that dude. Like, Berlanga is not this guy. So we'll see. It's hard to tell until they're tested. It's just hard. It's hard. Just enjoy the flash. Enjoy the highlight reel KOs until we get some real resistance with the Torres. Because until then, we really don't know. We really don't know what to do. Should fight every 2 months. That's the thing. Like, you watch how many, like, go do yourself, like, do some homework today. Watch how many times Tommy Hearns fought early in his career. Like go back and watch how many times that guy was fighting, how active he was at the prospect level. Like, we don't know. Like, the guys were fighting every month. Guys were fighting 10 times a year at the prospect level. Now we got guys fighting 3 to 4 times at the prospect level. It's disgusting. So yeah, I mean, at least every 2 months. Like, Torres, how much energy did he expend last night? He expends more energy training. He expends more energy sparring. So less exercising, less training. No, these guys are overtraining, under fighting. Like, if he's gonna fight that type of guy, fight once a month. But at least every 2 months, at least he should be fighting 6 times per year at this level. Keyshawn Davis too. And that's the thing. Like, I noticed Keyshawn Davis announced his opponent is going to be Tago. Fought Ryan Garcia, so it's a good measuring stick, right? Good measuring stick fight. But at the same time, I don't like this scam these fighters are running. The alibis, right? The alibi scam that they're running is they call out certain fighters on Twitter, on Instagram, and then they fight another guy who is underneath their level, right? So like a Keyshawn Davis is calling out top lightweights. A Keyshawn Davis, he'll call out top lightweights, and then he'll fight a Tagu. And the Tagu, like, it's an acceptable opponent for him at this point. It is. And it's a good measuring stick against a Ryan Garcia. It's that type of fight. I have no problem with the Tagu fight for Keyshawn Davis. But what they're doing, these fighters, is they're calling out certain fighters, saying, I will beat all these guys at this point, and then acting like, oh, these guys are just ducking me. They're all ducking. They're all doing this. Like, they're all ducking me, so I'm going to settle with a Tagu. No. Stop doing that. Tagu is a good opponent. He's an acceptable opponent for this point. He's not a great fighter, but he's acceptable at this point. But let's not act like Keyshawn Davis is already up here. He's not there in the process. We don't know how great he is up until this point. So don't let these fighters get away with calling out top-level fighters. And just because they called out top-level fighters, now they're a top-level fighter. Just because they clout chased. They should feed Jake Paul or Richard Torres. Torres is still a 1-year pro. Give him a little time. I can't believe I said that. No, you're right though. Like, you're right though, Bruce. It's. I got no problem with this part of the process. I'm just sort of calling out the journalists and the boxing fans out there who virtue signal about fighter safety, and then they let stuff like this go, which is the natural part of the process. I'm fine with the bait dog process of boxing. I'm a boxing fan. I understand, like, I don't want to get on here and act moral when I'm fine with this stuff, but other people do. Like, they try to get away with acting like moral superiors to everybody else when they're fine with the bait dogs getting rolled too. But what I'm saying with Torres, I have no issues with this part of the process. This is where he should be, right? He should be mowing guys down every 2 months at least, 6 times per year. Mowing guys down. Get the guy some bodies on his resume. Get him some knockouts, get him some experience, get him some confidence, and then we go to the next level. Next year, we graduate to the next level, right? I'm fine with that part of the process. Perfectly fine with it. But until he steps up to that next level, we just don't know yet, right? We just enjoy it while it's happening. But much like with Berlanga, we find out on that next level and then the level after that. There are just many levels that you go to, and he's at the bottom beginner's level of the game. Jared Anderson seems a good guy too. General public likes a good guy like AJ. That's right. That's right. Let's see what else we got. A few years ago, Navarrete was fighting 4 times a year. That's right. That's right. And Munguia too. How many times Munguia fight last year? Was it 3 or 4? Something like that. So at least they're keeping him quarterly, right? I'm perfectly fine with that. But at some point you got to graduate. At some point you got to get that guy. You got to get that top guy on your resume. And I think later, the second half of this year, I think Munguia is going to be in that fight. Just that's just a feeling I get. Shout out my girl Anna Lee. Appreciate you coming through. Stay in shape by fighting more, therefore less training. That's right. Stay in shape in between fights. As my guy Steve Kim always says, the first couple weeks of training camp now is fat camp, unfortunately. Customato had Tyson fighting 20 times a year when he got started. That's what I'm saying. Like it's just a different world now. It's a different world. Like when we ask a prospect like Torres to fight every other month, it just seems like a big ask. But that's like the bare minimum of what you should be doing at that level. Like the bare minimum. Really, guys, at that level should be fighting every month because you're doing more harm to your body in the training camp than you're doing what Torres did last. Torres didn't get hit. He didn't get hit. So, I mean, what's stopping him from fighting next month? He didn't get hit. Put him in there with another guy like that. Like, I mean, get this guy in front of people. That's another part of the process that's overlooked that these promoters are missing. And the reason we don't have an American star today is a Torres, like that guy should be fighting once per month on every undercard that Top Rank, every card that Top Rank puts on ESPN, that guy should be on it. He should be on it. And imagine the fan base you can build with that guy at that level. They're missing out, man. You understood my comment on fighting every 2 months. Yeah, he should be fighting every 2 months. The Beanie Effect and HCP is real, and HCP will be back Monday on D Styles channel. And like I said, I just wanted to hop on here on a Saturday while I had a little bit of time, got some family stuff to do in a little while, but really wanted to hop on here and get my Navarrete thoughts out there before Monday because I was watching that fight last night and I was like, man, why can't we just get more of this in boxing? I just give me a lot of fights like this and put them on TV. Give me a lot of fights like this. Give me more fighters like Navarrete. Give me more fighters like that. His hands got bruised. Torres fought on a Loma Ortiz fight. But, you know, barring a hand injury, if a guy isn't getting hit, there's no reason to not fight that guy again next month because I'm telling you, he's doing more damage to himself in sparring because he's having tougher sparring than what he had last night. Like last night was nothing to him. Last night was a breeze compared to what he has in training camp. So I don't want to hear that fighters fighting every month in real fights is barbaric because the real fight is actually at this level it's easier than the practice fights, the practice that he's getting in training camp. I'm telling you that's what's happening. So on that note, man, y'all have a great Saturday. I'll be watching I'll be on Twitter and I'll be watching the female fights later. Serrano, Baumgardner. From what I'm told, watch out for Baumgardner's opponent, who is pretty good and undervalued. But I think Serrano will roll and Serrano will cruise into that Katie Taylor rematch. God bless. Peace.